How much?
How much you gotta spend?
Frank, this is more than a month's salary.
Out here, it is all about our hustle.
Do you really have to take us to the station?
Say it works! Say it works! This works! Know that horse! Know that horse! Just that lost!
Welcome back to The Oldest Profession. We are calling this episode Mouthy Whores Are Gonna Save America. That's right, we're talking about national treasure, Stormy Daniels. The first thing that I want to say is that yesterday, the story broke that Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' personal and very charismatic and media-savvy attorney, was arrested on suspicion of domestic violence. Now, Stormy Daniels is taking the incredibly reasonable position that if the allegations are true, she will find another representative because she does not want to support abusers. I'm with Stormy Daniels on this one. If he's credibly accused of domestic violence, he shouldn't be representing her in this case because she is the embodiment of a woman being bullied by powerful men into denying her own truth. Let's get into it. So Stormy Daniels was born Stephanie in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to two parents that really shouldn't have been together. They got divorced right around the ages of 3 or 4, and her mother got custody, which is something that Stormy retroactively thinks is a mistake. After her father left them, her mother fell apart and seems to have suffered from a psychotic break, mental health issues that prevented her from taking care of Stephanie in a really basic way. She describes her childhood as one where her and the house she grew up in were dirty. This socially isolates her, and like a lot of figures that we cover on The Oldest Profession, gives her a lifelong fire in her belly of something to prove. So she was born Stephanie in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and is called dirty white trash her whole childhood. She grows up into this incredibly successful sex worker, porn star performer, writer, and director, and is called a whore her whole life. But from her childhood has a fuck you, watch this armor that I think is preparing her for the national fight that she's picked. So at the age of 17, she's still living at home with her mom. She is the editor of the school newspaper. She's making straight A's, and she's working at a horse farm in part for the money that she has an hour so that she can finally start taking care of her own needs since her mom hasn't been able to meet any of them, letting her frequently go hungry, have the lights go out, being unable to even bathe her daughter. As she gets older, she's able to take better care of herself. She's working at a horse farm, answering phones, and also so that she can have access to a lifelong love that she has, riding horses. The way that she frames this early love affair with riding horses is that it saved her from some of the more unseemly elements in her neighborhood, because if she hadn't been riding her horse all the time and spending so much time on horse farms, then she may have gotten sucked up in the traps of poverty all around her. So she's working at this horse farm making, some measly amount of money an hour, and then meets a girlfriend of hers at a local strip club and gets, at the age of 17, which is when I started sex work, gets encouraged to do an amateur show and falls in love with it. The club owners offer her a regular spot, assuming that she is older than she is. She takes one look at how much money that she can make, recognizes it as being a ticket out of her situation, takes the gig. She continues making straight A's at school. She continues editing the school newspaper. She becomes a seasoned performer at this strip club, quitting that club when she realizes that they won't defend her when a client starts to get grabby, which is the motivation that she needs to level up to a bigger club. She moves out of her mother's house, never looks back, moves in with a guy friend of hers, meets all of these incredible women on the road, talks about this great roadie lifestyle. She's living like and hanging out with rock stars. And one of the women that she's developed a friendship with, who acted as an early mentor of hers in the world of stripping, invites her out so that they can try to break into porn together. Now, Stormy Daniels describes her experience in porn as, let's say, a very privileged one, which I think is important it's important to recognize, and I really appreciate her self-awareness on this issue. She meets the right people right away. She gets picked up and signed an exclusive contract with Wicked, which is a porn production company. She becomes one of their stars. It limits the exposure that she has to the more seedy elements of the industry. This is basically like becoming a stand-up comic without ever having to be an open micer, right? It's like she sort of steps into the upper echelons of the porn industry without having to work her way up, really limiting her exposure to the more exploitative elements of this industry. While working as a starlet for Wicked, they discover that she can write. She starts writing scripts for them, and after years of being a star and being a writer, directs her first film and crushes it. So now she's a triple threat, working as a writer, director, and star for a very successful porn company in LA. Her career is taking off. They invite her to do a promotional event at a golf club, at a golf tournament. That's where she meets, and I'm going to very generously use the word seduced by Donald Trump. I can't recommend Stormy Daniels' book, Full Disclosure, enough. She's hilarious. She's self-aware. She's led an incredible life. I'm not doing it full justice on this podcast. This is a woman I would love to hang out with, would love to know more, and whose respect I would love to earn. Stormy Daniels is a badass, and her book is a fantastic read. Her description of Donald Trump, the man, it's everything that we already know and more. This guy is just as bad in bed as his narcissistic, sweaty, incompetent umbrella closing makes you think that he is. And Stormy Daniels' expert description of it is worth it. Now, she is not paid for this encounter, right? She is a porn star working with Wicked at this golf tournament. Donald Trump invites her to dinner, and instead of feeding her, just invites her up to his hotel room and monologues at her for an hour. Now, Stormy Daniels expertly shifts the conversation by spanking him with a copy of his own magazine that he was trying to show off to her, gets enough of his respect in the moment that he starts spitballing the possibility of her being on the show that he was producing at the time, The Apprentice. She takes this offer seriously enough to humor him for the rest of the evening, but he never actually fucking feeds her, nor does he ever actually get her on the fucking show. Her description of this whole thing is great. Their evening ends, let's say it anticlimactically. Donald Trump, I believe in Stormy Daniels' constitutionally protected right to tell us that Donald Trump looks like a hairless circus bear who's been made to stand, and the kind of guy who, if he ever accidentally made a woman wet, he'd be like, ew, slimy. So their sexual encounter is non-memorable aside from the fact of his celebrity. In fact, Stormy Daniels makes a point that I think anyone who's ever consented to this kind of disappointing sex, the kind that leaves a bad taste in your mouth afterwards, every time she had to see this clown on TV, she went, ugh, I had sex with that guy. Fast forward, 2010, there's a group of superfans of Stormy Daniels that put together a website called Draft Stormy, encouraging her to run against Louisiana Senator David Vitter. Now, Stormy is initially incensed at their suggestion, but upon reflection, hearing about the proposals that David Vitter wants to make, like removing funding for sexual education, making it harder for women to access an abortion, she thinks that this is such a violation that she begins a campaign that really starts to to actually take off. She's having an impact on the conversation that's being had. She doesn't expect to win the Louisiana Senate seat, but she does hope to shift the conversation and use her celebrity status to raise the profile of sex workers and women and to highlight the hypocrisy of the Republican Party in Louisiana. Stormy Daniels describes herself as a Republican. She was a registered Democrat her whole life. She's pro-choice. She's pro-porn. She's anti-censorship. She is a social progressive. She believes in LGBTQ rights. She's worked with, let's call it, an underclass of people that this administration is actively oppressing, herself included. But I think, like a lot of successful entrepreneurs, she resents Democrats' incompetence at some of the social welfare reforms, regulatory efforts, and let's just say it, the whorephobia within the Democratic Party. So Stormy Daniels is a self-described Republican, but she's also the one saving America from this administration. So when Stormy Daniels was considering a run for Senate and considering switching her party affiliation to run to run a campaign as a primary challenge to David Vitter, who refused to debate her or acknowledge her in public, by the way, in the way that like old white dudes think they can, but they can't anymore. Sorry, backing up. So when Stormy Daniels was considering a primary challenge against David Vitter and considering switching her party affiliation from Democrat to Republican, it was actually the Republican Party hosting a lesbian bondage event that convinced her that the Republicans are better on sex worker rights issues than the Democrats are, and who can blame her? Let's remind our listeners that it is the Libertarian Party that has taken the official position that sex workers are people. In 2010, she runs a primary challenge against David Vitter and actually starts to get a lot of traction because, surprise, surprise, Louisiana learned 8 years before the rest of America does. Stormy Daniels makes a lot of good points. So she's running this campaign. She's not being acknowledged by her opponent, who, in the words of Rudy Giuliani, tries to dismiss her using her sex worker status. But she's starting to gain traction, starting to get fundraising dollars, starting to get media attention, and her campaign manager's car blows up. There's video footage of a Molotov cocktail being thrown at it, but the Louisiana police refuse to acknowledge it as foul play, saying that the car, quote, didn't really explode. This, of course, frightens Stormy Daniels, who is in the midst of what can be described as a very contentious divorce. But she releases a statement that I think is important to remember, where she says that the fact that her opponent, David Vitter, has $5 million is the real problem in the discrepancy between their campaigns. Stormy Daniels is withdrawing her nomination for Senate not because she's an adult film star, not because she was embroiled in a domestic dispute, for the same reason that lots of patriots are unable to run for political office. They can't afford it. So right around this time, Stormy Daniels starts dating future husband and future father of her child, Glenn, following him around, continuing their rock star life. He is a literal rock star. A few years into their relationship, they both decide to have a child. And this is a moment that I think really speaks to the state of sex worker rights in America, Stormy Daniels' genius, and something that I think all of our listeners will appreciate. Stormy Daniels agrees to have a kid with this man on the one condition that he do porn. Not because she wants him to empathize with her, not because she's looking for a male co-star, but specifically because she doesn't want him to be able to take their child away using the fact that she's a porn star against her. She'd been in the industry for enough time to know women who had had their children taken away even without the malicious intent of their partner. She tells one story that I think is horrifying of two people who were getting divorced. One of hers was a friend of hers. And even though they were seeking to share custody, the judge decided, based on his own beliefs, that porn stars could not make good mothers and awards full custody over the objection of both parents to the father. Now, those people were, of course, sharing custody, but if there was ever a legal dispute, mom would be fucked. So Stormy Daniels bullies her husband into doing porn so that they can have a baby together, which they do. Now, so they have a baby. This is when shit hits the fan. Stormy Daniels' husband, immediately after the birth of their daughter, has a mental health breakdown exacerbated by his substance abuse issues and revisiting the trauma of his own childhood. This is an experience that I think a lot of new parents have, that having a baby can really bring back the bad memories of what they went through and raise a lot of questions. This is also around the time that In Touch magazine reaches out to Stormy Daniels, threatening to break the story of her and Donald Trump's alleged affair. Stormy Daniels has a character trait that I certainly empathize with, and I know that a lot of our listeners can empathize with. A fuck you, watch this, I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone else tell or profit from my story. So In Touch magazine reaches out to her with rumors of this alleged, I think affair is the wrong word. One night stand also feels wrong. Regrettable incident, like I don't know what the word to use. Just read the book. Full disclosure, by Stormy Daniels. If this entire episode is just a commercial for Stormy Daniels' book, I'm fine with that. So she decides to reveal information to In Touch magazine and lets her then agent at the time, Gina, negotiate details for telling the story of her evening with Donald Trump. She tells the bone-chilling incident of being, a quintessential harried mom on the way to the gym with her one-year-old daughter, and being approached by a guy that she describes as being in sexy jeans, who she thought was asking for directions, and instead leans over her to look at her daughter and say, "That's a pretty little girl you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." This begins a litany of threats, finally accumulating in her agent at the time, hooking her up with a shady lawyer who offers her $130,000 to not tell her story. Now, her husband is having a mental breakdown. Her daughter is 1 year old. She's getting back on her feet professionally, and being the cum bucket of the grossest president this country has ever had is not the brand that this incredibly accomplished woman is trying to build. So she takes the money and signs the non-disclosure agreement, hoping that that makes this go away, when in fact the opposite happens. The Trump campaign makes hay about Stormy Daniels calling her a liar, which is actually in violation of the agreement. And this story blows up bigger than it ever has, but now with Stormy Daniels having her hands tied behind her back, being absolutely unable to defend herself. This is when she does an interview with Jimmy Kimmel. The threats continue, and she is coerced into signing a series of now incompetent and legally indefensible non-disclosure agreements. This is also when she discovers that her quote-unquote attorney is actually working for and with Michael Cohen, not defending his client, in absolute violation of attorney-client privilege. And she realizes that she is losing her husband, losing her mind. She's already lost her parents, and she doesn't even have a fucking lawyer in her corner. So she starts shopping around, which is when she finds Michael Avenatti. The book ends with this case still very much undecided. The epilogue is where we discover Stormy Daniels being arrested for the ludicrous crime of letting someone touch her tits in a strip club in Ohio. And of course, right before recording this episode, Michael Avenatti is arrested on the charge of domestic violence. This is a woman who has had to fight for herself her whole life, is fighting to reclaim her own story, and is possibly facing a future where she doesn't have an attorney. She doesn't have the support of her parents. She's being attacked by the President of the United States. And as she beautifully articulates in her book is trying to avoid being one of a long list of women silenced forever by powerful men who think that they have the right to take a sex worker story away from them. So this podcast celebrates the general badassery, good writing, and incredible story of Stormy Daniels. Thank you for listening to The Oldest Profession. Thank you to our patrons. Y'all are the best. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you, as always, to our brilliant producer, Justine McClellan. Consider checking out our Instagram, at Old Pro Podcast, to see tons of images of the old pros we talk about on the show. Go to Twitter, also at Old Pro Podcast, for the latest in sex worker events, activism opportunities, and of course, snarky commentary on the news of the day impacting sex workers. Please rate and review us on iTunes. It's a small thing, but it helps a lot. It helps people find us because algorithms. If you're considering coming out as a sex worker to somebody in your life, try suggesting that they listen to the podcast. How they react to this is a pretty good litmus test as to whether or not they'll try to shame you for being an old pro. All of the growth of this podcast so far has been the result of word of mouth, so please keep telling your friends. If everyone tells just one person, we can double our numbers and reach even more old pros and allies. The more listeners we have, the more we can chip away at this stubborn stigma. And again, thank you so much for listening. This has been The Oldest Profession.